TikTok has taken over. In 2022, it became the most downloaded app in the world and was on course to overtake YouTube as the most watched video platform. In trying to fend off this new challenger, most other platforms have been reduced to simply imitating TikTok's most distinctive features. With the introduction of YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels, as well as amendments to Twitter's Explore tab, short, vertical video is now everywhere. But TikTok's success isn't solely built on the form that the videos on the platform take. That success mostly stems from its algorithm. TikTok seems to have an almost paranormal ability to reach into the recesses of our minds and discover what content we're most likely to keep watching, even if we didn't know that that was what we wanted to watch ourselves. There are many positives to this. I've personally discovered some amazing creators that I never would have heard of in an age of analog gatekeepers. Nevertheless, it also has the potential to trap creators in very specific niches, encouraging them to make content for increasingly insular communities of fans. To discuss some of the bizarre consequences that this can all lead to, I hopped on a call with another creator who has become fascinated with TikTok over the past couple of years, Mia Mulder. Hello, Mia. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm doing very well.
You had a
Um,
bit busy day?
yeah, very busy day. I got home like 3 minutes before we started like doing the pre-talk for this little interview thingy. Um, Turns out that being both a YouTuber and a politician at the same time is like it's difficult to make everyone's schedules work up, but it works fine.
Yeah, both things that it does feel like a real spectrum of like something that like feels like a very respectable thing and which of course is the YouTube one and
Yes, yes, that's the one that has worth and value to the world.
the dual life.
I
But
say this as a joke. I'm not really joking.
has it been quite a shift into? I don't want to pry into it too much if it's. But has it been much? Has it been a big shift from like being YouTube person to being like official city person?
Not really. Like you kind of do the same shit. You just have to go to an office. Like you still have to sort of like you write a lot of documents. You have to come up with like interesting ideas and fun way to present those ideas. Um, but instead of doing it in like a fun video setting, you have to do it in a sort of like in the like you have to learn official speak. But it's basically the same
Mm.
thing once you learn official speak, like legalese.
Being a politician is just like being a YouTuber, but for a slightly different audience.
Yeah, it's kind of like being a boomer YouTuber.
A boomer YouTuber. I suppose like there is, there is costumes to it. There is like,
But there is though. Like I've had to get an entirely different wardrobe because if I wear just like my casual outfits, people look at me weird because I'm not dressed like a politician. So you have to get
mm,
sort of like you have to get the suit, you have to get the like the ties, you have to get the pins, you have to get everything like that. So that's fun.
I've realized for filming these, I've been like, I think I'm gonna get some extra clothes that are like podcast clothes because I was like, I don't have like I have like what I assume is like a normal number of jumpers, but then we were gonna film these to go out every other week, and I was like, well, how like I if I accidentally wear the same jumper like four in a row, people are gonna think I've only got like one jumper, which is not usually a problem for YouTube videos because I only put one out every 2 months. Um, so I feel like I'm gonna also have like a weird costume for this
Yeah.
in the end. um, but the kind of platform that I asked you to come and talk about today is sort of not the one that we are most familiar with. Um, but is the sort of insurgent new, the kind of new kid on the block, TikTok, which I take it you're like a reasonable user of.
I use it. I don't post as much as I should.
Mm.
Because like I've learned in sort of like the content creation space that's where the kids hang out, and I want to connect with the youths. Hello, fellow
Okay,
kids.
this is like
Um,
you're finding your new audience to bring over to YouTube.
Well, I mean, ideally, yes, but I don't actually do that. Like, I mostly just scroll. Like, I spend a significant portion of my free time just scrolling through TikTok, but that also meant that I've sort of learned the language of the weird algorithmic niche that TikTok has sorted me in, which
Mm.
is which alternates day by day. It
Yeah.
seems.
I mean, that's the thing that I've noticed, like, even more than YouTube, I think. And the thing that, like, I think fascinates me about it, like TikTok more than anything, is the way that it really pulls you into very specific, um, sort of like boxes. I don't know what you'd call them, or like
Yeah.
niches that it like places you in. What is your current uh box that you feel like it's putting you in?
I'm currently in the trans woman ADHD box,
That's your
but
like Venn diagram of what it sends you.
you know that's sort of what it is. But it because I've previously made a video on like the conspiracy theory of Tartaria, and I did a lot of sort of like research on TikTok specifically for that one,
Mm,
and so like every other day or something, I'll just be like temporarily sorted into sort of like conspiracy theory TikTok, but
mm.
not sort of like ironically or investigating, but like the hardcore believers. So TikTok, I think, knows or like suspects that like I have some sort of like conspiracy theory vibe, but they can't really figure out like how I fit into it. So that's fun.
Yeah, because I think because like sort of short form video is increasingly like everywhere. And I think like what a lot of people think of like the thing that makes TikTok work is the kind of, it's the vertical videos, it's the short form. Although you can do like increasingly long TikToks now, I think. Um,
Yeah, but
but it does feel like the like powerful algorithm seems to be the thing that like that's how I feel like I'm quite a late adopter. I feel like I maybe 6 months ago, I think I first downloaded
ooh, yeah.
TikTok. Or like maybe I'd had it for like a brief period, I think, and then been like, oh, I'm not really sure what to do with it. Like you say, like it felt too much for the kids. And then like at some point I was like, okay, I'm gonna sort of give this another go if this is like the new thing. Um, and I found myself like going back and forth between using it lots and then almost finding it like too smothering in its like in the way that it is difficult to escape.
Yeah, the algorithm is really really good at figuring out what you want to watch next.
Mm,
Um, like I noticed when I started watching TikTok that like in the beginning it was sort of like the videos initially were a bit like vague and very varied and very sort of milk toast. But eventually, once it starts to like learn your algorithm, it starts to figure out really well what you like, and then
mm.
after a while, you just sit out on like for hours and just scrolling through people doing whatever it is that they're doing on your specific TikTok feed. Um,
I actually when I first signed up, I got it was clearly like trying to work. It was sort of interesting to see like it trying to a site that has like no information at all about you, and particularly like the way it works because it's like I don't know, it's not like YouTube. You get like a few options, don't you? And then you sort of pick. It's almost like I don't know. You're like picking one of those. You're like choosing which door to go through. Whereas
yeah,
TikTok literally just thrusts something at you, and then it's like, how long are you sort of what how long are you watching it for, I guess, is the sort of thing it's got to go on. um
I did some research about this like months ago, like about the metrics that they use. They use a ton of metrics to figure out what kind of content you like. Um, not just like the not just watch time, but also like how much you interact with it, obviously, but also how likely you are to swipe back to check on something that you saw before, and like
ah,
and even just like because sometimes when you scroll through, you might scroll through something very quickly, just like this has no interest to me, or you scroll through and you give it like a second until you scroll on. So you haven't watched the TikTok, but you've
mm,
given it more interest than you've given other TikToks. So and then it's analyzing that 1 second to figure out sort of like what's the type of content in that second, what's the kind of like what's the thing that made you stay for 1 second. Um, and then it uses that to like give you other shit, and like it keeps trying to get you to keep scrolling rather than to keep watching.
Mm, yeah, it doesn't
Because
necessarily need you to stay on one video. It just needs to keep you on the
yeah,
site. I think the first box I got thrown in was like, so I'd like, I think this was like the day I got it, and I'd loaded it up and was watching through. And are you aware of the British TV show EastEnders?
I have heard of it.
Okay, I don't know. It was like it's one of those things where I'm like, I have no idea if this has a huge international audience or not.
I all I know is I heard some from like a comedian that the theme song is like da 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 da,
I mean,
something like
for
that.
only
That's
having
all.
heard of
That's
it,
all I
that is
know.
like that was a pretty bang on, that was a pretty bang on like rendition of the theme. It's like a soap. It like plays. I think it's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think it's like every weeknight, and then I think they do like a what they call like an omnibus on a Sunday where they sort of show it all. And it's not something I watch these days, but it is something that like growing up was always on in our house. And I was sort of scrolling through the first few, like you say, really bland TikToks, and one of them was a character from EastEnders, sort of walking out the house, and I was like, I think she's called Old Mo. I think there was an old Mo and a young Mo, and it was Old Mo, and she was walking out the house. And I was like, oh, it's like a character from EastEnders. Oh, wonder what happens on EastEnders these days. Um, and she was going like Charlie, Charlie, looking for her friend Charlie. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll just sort of see what's going to happen here. And then it just looped back to the beginning after like maybe like 20 seconds. And then I looked down at the caption, and it was like me on a Friday night. And it turned out it had decided to place me in the bucket of like uh, we might have to bleep this out but of like cocaine. TikTok was like that in the UK, that is slang for cocaine. And it just and like suddenly and I was just like innocently watching this video from like from EastEnders, and it was like no, this is the stuff, this is what this guy wants, just all. And then I was like sort of predicting how the algorithm was working to try
Hmm.
and make to be like, because I was like, I feel like there's more interesting stuff that I'm more interested in than this. So
No, it's cocaine. It's all cocaine now.
yeah, like not anymore. Like I managed to break myself out of this particular, but I was like, so I was like trying to be like, no, I don't want that, because I want to see like the things I actually want to see. But it was like really interesting, like having been on it for like 20-30 minutes at this
Hmm.
point, like seeing it trying to, because I feel like every other website already has loads of information about you, I think. Like,
Hmm.
and so like with a completely blank slate, it was really interesting to see it being like, so what does Tom want? And like you could see it like leading you down certain or leading me down certain paths.
Yeah.
Um
Like
that,
trying out different things to see like how well you connect, like
yeah.
showing you some other shit occasionally and be like, do you like this maybe? You know.
Yeah. In fact, like there's like a few. I think there's been a few different buckets. I've ended up in. Have you had any where you've just ended up in like a weirdly? I don't know. Bucket's not the right word, is it? I don't know
Oh,
why that's what.
oh, for sure. I ended up in pan-European white supremacy TikTok for
Okay.
reasons that I do not understand. I think it's because I like a lot of history stuff. Um, I like a lot of history stuff. I play a lot of like grand strategy video games, sort of like
Mm,
Crusader Kings, Hearts of Iron 4, that kind of shit. And those subcultures do have a pretty like large minority of like white supremacists.
yeah.
Um, and and also like a lot of like geopolitics stuff and things like that. And like occasionally it sort of just shows me this like redrawn Nazi propaganda, like straight up like Nazi posters, but where they've just replaced like Germanness with Europeanness, and like the glory of European culture and shit like that. And I kept having to be like, I'm not interested in this. I don't like this.
Please
Like,
stop. Please stop.
please
And,
stop this.
and
But
that
it
wasn't
kept
from
doing
like
it.
trying to like look for stuff for videos. That was just that it.
Yeah, exactly. Like complete organically from the algorithm trying to sort me in that scenario. It was really frustrating because I don't know what that sort of says about what else that I watch. Because what
Mm,
else that I watch is typically sort of like left wing historians, um, and people making funny jokes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like where's the overlap here with sort of like white supremacists? That hasn't happened now for a while. I'm very happy about that. I've sort of zoned out of that. But that's the weirdest one. That's the weirdest bucket that I've been placed into.
I had a brief period in have you heard of what Dinks? This was
Dinks?
Dinks. There's a whole area of people who refer to themselves as Dinks.
I've never heard of the concept of
Okay,
dinks.
maybe this is because I guess in English, but like so this is double income, no kids. And this is like a whole like bit of TikTok which is dedicated to people talking about how great it is to be like two working adult, all like sort of in their 20s, maybe into their 30s mostly, um, who, you know, both work and don't have any children. Um, but in like a slightly weird way where it feels kind of like aggressive and like not like it's not like a just like like
A
I'm
little
very
culty, almost.
yeah, like I'm very glad that like I feel like a lot of society is very much angled towards people who are in couples and have like a family and a kind of like normative family. And so, you know, it's like one of those where you're like, oh, I'm very glad that, you know, you're happy in this um kind of household setup that maybe doesn't look like that. But like there's a weird like almost like hating kids element to it.
Yeah. I've seen elements of this. I haven't really been sorted into it, but
Mm.
I've seen it around. I've seen people sort of like interact with that community.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
And there's like mostly they just do sort of like normal stuff though, but like they do it in a way they're like, oh, we went to the cinema today, but like they've somehow like made that part of their like identity in like in a way that I don't know doesn't necessarily automatically follow, but for them makes it feel really special.
yeah. Oh, we went to the bar. That
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is a privilege that only we have.
Um, but yeah, I also did spend I think I spent a brief time in the kind of the gala. That's probably the closest conspiracy one that I've got to. I think I
The the Gaylor?
oh, have you not heard of the galas?
No.
Oh, so this is a okay, so I suppose my journey into it was that I was, you know, I'm sort of scrolling through TikTok, and I think at some point, Taylor Swift performing live came onto the feed, and I enjoyed the music of Taylor Swift. I presumably watched her perform one of her songs, and
Yeah,
it was good.
as any
Um,
reasonable person would do.
yeah, and then like I must have done that like a couple of times, and then it was like, right, this guy loves Taylor Swift, like it's just all Taylor Swift content. And then if you go deep enough into Taylor Swift TikTok, it's people who are certain that Taylor Swift is gay and is trying to like communicate it, and it's really
Oh,
like through her, and it's really uncomfortable because maybe like do you know, like maybe she is, and like
yeah. In
there's
like
like a
sure.
trying to like find any it's like just piecing together clues from like wherever they can find them in a way
Oh
that
yeah.
feels
I've seen this. I've seen this. Like yeah, it's very conspiracy
mm,
minded. Like it's very sort of like putting like red strings on cork wallpaper. Uh,
yeah of this
where they
lyric
will like
here and then
analyze clothing choices and like who they're hanging out with at any given moment, and assuming that that means that they're some sort of like lesbian lover. Yeah.
yeah the reason I particularly like so I was like I want to do an episode on TikTok. I was like, who am I going to ask on? The particular reason that I was like, okay, Mia's definitely the person for this was your video on Tartaria.
Hmm.
Am I pronouncing that? I mean, I say correctly. I don't know if there is a
Yeah.
correct.
God no, I don't think there is like most people in the community call it Tartaria, um, but that's not. There's no way that's correct because there's no correct pronunciation of this sort of like fake word that Europeans came up with.
We'll come. I want to come back to whether it has a connection to tartar sauce. Oh no, that has an e. So presumably, is that a thing? Is that a thing outside of the UK? Tartar sauce?
Yes,
Any
yes, it is.
connection?
Um, a very not really a very vague one, sort of, because the linguistic root of because like it's all the more complicated by the fact that there's an ethnic group also called Tartars, um,
Okay.
and it has no connection to that ethnic group at all. Like that, but the linguistic root of Tartaria as a sort of like geographic thing comes from like people talking about the Mongol Empire in Europe and saying that like they are much like Tartarus, which is like hell,
Mm.
which was like that's the meme culture of like of the age, calling things like they are Tartarus. Um, and tartar sauce, and ever since then, like Tartaria has sort of like been the European vague name for like Asia, vaguely anything like east of Bulgaria, basically. Um,
And tartar
and the
sauce.
idea is that like tartar sauce and other tartar foods are anything that comes from like the east.
Okay, so it's like to use a similarly outdated but slightly more recent outdated word. It's like an Oriental sauce.
Yeah, I think so. To be like, my
Okay.
research didn't dig into the sauce specifically, so I'm not super sure, but I'm pretty sure that that's where the connection is.
Had I made a video about it, it would have mostly been about the sauce. It would have been me having some fish and chips. Okay, but for anyone that's listening that has no idea what we're currently talking about, you got dragged into a community of people who believe that
Yes.
there was a previous civilization that has
Mm-hmm.
been hidden from us called
Yes.
Tartaria.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is the
Yeah.
like broad, I mean, like I mean, obviously, if you're watching, go away and watch the video because it is fascinating and like a real opening a lid on a world of that I did. I think all like my entire experience of TikTok has been mostly realizing that although I think I'm someone who uses the internet quite a reasonable amount, um, that I am sort of a mere pond skater on the sort of murky depths of like it makes me feel very offline. Like it makes me feel like I've got no idea what's going on. But like it
Yeah.
felt like you really like opened the lid on a whole world of people with a whole lot of time. About so what's like the broad overview of the Tartaria theory? Well, I don't know what they call it. Conspiracy. Maybe they don't like the word conspiracy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird because like everyone who believes in Tartaria believes in like a vague overlap of similar ideas, but there's no sort of like official canon of Tartaria. So depending on who you ask, it can mean something completely different. But like the overarching themes are, like you said, like the idea that there has been a global spanning empire that's based in modern day Mongolia and Siberia, called Tartaria or Great Tartary, that controlled the entire world and built many, if not all, many of like the great wonders of the world, and also like much of the great architecture of the world, like the pyramids, and also like the Statue of Liberty, and like the cathedral at Cologne, and Grand Central Station. Um, so like all of those buildings are what many would call Tartarian architecture, by which they mean anything that is not the modern day international style of architecture, which is just glass and concrete.
But so up till
Um,
quite recent, like when was
yes,
like when was the Statue of Liberty? That's like
it's so recent actually,
like
because like
300 years old, 400. No, not 400 years
It's
old.
so much closer because like they believe that like this empire controlled the entire world up until like 100 years ago in some
Oh
cases.
wow. Okay.
Um, they possessed advanced technology, which is how they built all these structures. They could harness free energy from the ether, which is why in Russia, old cathedrals have like those like golden domes on top. Those are energy generators.
Okay, of course.
Um, which is why that type of architecture is common in Asia and like that area. Like when you have those like big bulbs on top of buildings, those are remnants from Tartarian energy generators. But this empire fell oftentimes in a mud flood. So it's also sometimes called the mud flood theory.
Okay.
Sometime between 300 and 100 years ago. And the this coincides with the new empires, which is oftentimes labeled as the British Empire, or like the American Empire, or the Russian Empire, or like many of the vaguely European Western empires, um, waging a great war against Tartaria and taking over like the global power from them. And they have since rewritten all of global history to erase Tartaria from human memory so that we won't sort of like realize what has been taken away from us.
Because was it like great? Was like is Tartaria like that was really good? Like they
Yeah,
don't want us to have that.
yeah, free clean energy, like super advanced things, super advanced technology, super high standard of living, every like race and ethnicity living in harmony together. Um, some people believe that they went to space, but that's not super agreed upon.
I like the idea
Um,
that there's like splits where like someone's like, oh, they went to the moon, and someone else is like, oh, don't be ridiculous. Like
don't be ridiculous. They couldn't do that. Um,
the energy they were harnessing through the like cathedral domes couldn't quite have propelled them like quite.
um, and yeah, so that's sort of like the vague theory. Who orchestrated sort of like this fall of the empire is, sometimes they blame the British Empire, but oftentimes they blame the Jews, because of course, or um, or like just vaguely sort of like a parasitic class on society. And the only evidence they have of this theory, because it's a pretty bold claim,
Mm.
like to be fair, like because you also have to rewrite all of human history, um,
And like
is
like if it was only 100 years ago, like my gran would have been born just after that. Like it's not like
you know
I don't know this.
but that great war that they talked about against Tartaria, they argue that those are the world wars. Some people argue this. um, So the First and Second World War didn't happen, according to many of these theorists, because that was actually the war against Tartaria.
And what? Okay, so
So
there's the war and there's the mud flood, and these are both.
yes, so the Mud Flood weakened the empire, and while the empire was weakened, the empires which were which were already sort of like vassal states to Great Tartaria,
Mm.
um, decided to rebel and take the power for themselves. So like the British Empire existed before before the fall of Tartaria, but they were sort of like subservient to Tartaria, same
Oh,
as many
oh,
of the
the
other
Hunger
sort of like
Games. It was the Hunger Games.
kind of.
And like wait, but so did the did the British Empire like or have like the magic power, like the magic electricity, or they didn't have that, and that was like
No, they could use that same energy. They
okay.
could use a similar technology, but now that the Tartarians are gone, we can't harness it anymore. And because it's like free energy, you can't make money out of it. So you have to
Okay.
dismantle this technology in order to oppress people and sort of to extract wealth from them, and to have us pay for like food and energy and have us work, um, because in Tartaria, they had a class system in Tartaria allegedly, and that was like giants, some say, who controlled it as benevolent dictators. And
Like actually physical giants.
yes,
Of course. Like, I don't know why. Like every time you introduce a new thing, I'm like, that's the thing that like I don't know. I feel like I acclimatize to everything else, and I'm like, okay, I'm there, and then I'm like, oh, giants have really broken it for me.
And yeah,
There's like a whole
because yeah,
sociology of like this. So wait, like the giants are powerful, presumably.
they're just giants who like who were like the lords of Tartaria, who like who took over the world at some point and then developed this advanced technology. Depending on who you ask, there's a lot of white supremacists in this movement. Those giants were white and were Aryans, and then modern day white people are descendants from them, which is sort of like how this is the reason they claim that white people are superior, like the superior race, because we're the inheritors of Tartaria. Um,
How does it get? How does it become linked to like? How does it become so right wing? All of
so the origins of this theory are very loosely connected to a extremely right wing Russian propaganda conspiracy theory. That is, oh God, I don't remember the name of it. That's called New Chronology, which is made by this mathematician who argues that all of human history has been faked, and events that happen like in antiquity actually happen in the Middle Ages, and but in that theory, Russia controlled the entire world, and Russia was this sort of like global superpower who have only recently been sort of like toppled, and now history has been faked to sort of erase Russian greatness. And this is a very sort of like ethno-nationalistic conspiracy theory that claims that white Russians were in charge of this like former great Russian empire that he calls the Russian horde. So there are very strong similarities between these theories, but uh, New Chronology is very specifically about Russia and has like this argument of like, well, real Russia encompasses like all of Europe and like almost all of Asia and like has dominance of Earth. But this theory about Tartaria has sort of been imported to the West because it's only really popular in like the US and Western Europe, and has been decoupled from Russianness, which means that now people, depending on like what beliefs you have, they will sort of like fill the void with whatever like other ideas that they have. So white supremacists they will sort of insert white supremacy in there. You have people who are anti-Semitic, they will insert sort of like anti-Semitism in there. And then you have people who like just have questions about like, why can't we build fancy buildings anymore?
So like the whole like we had a perfect lost land, and then it was you just insert your people we don't like into to be the reason that the great empire fell.
Yeah, pretty much.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying my chat with Mia. If you are, and you want to listen or watch further episodes of the show, then you might be interested to know that every single episode of Induction is released a full 2 weeks early on my streaming service, Nebula. By this point, you've probably heard of Nebula. It's a premium streaming service built by a bunch of education and education-adjacent creators to give us more agency in the content that we create. You'll find loads of your favourite creators on there. Page Bomber Guy, Philosophy Tube, Second Thought, and me. Alongside having zero ads and sponsor reads, Nebula is packed with a bumper library of original content which is completely exclusive to the site. For example, if you want to watch Lindsay Ellis's latest couple of videos, one on Amazon's The Rings of Power and one on the cultural legacy of E.T., you simply can't find those elsewhere. And, as I mentioned a moment ago, both the video and audio versions of every single episode of Induction are released on Nebula a full 2 weeks before they make it to YouTube, Spotify, or any other platforms. If you're interested in finding out more about Nebula, then you can support the show by heading there using our special link, nebula.tv/induction. This will ensure that you get the absolute best deal on Nebula at any given time, and will also send a chunk of change our way to help make more episodes of the show. So, if you want to get access to all that great content from your favourite creators while supporting me to make more good stuff, then head to nebula.tv/induction. Now, back to my chat with Mia.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because with the mud flood, right? To go back to the natural disaster, There's a whole thing about buildings being buried, right?
Yes. So they have the idea that like when you ask for evidence of this theory, they look at they demonstrate pictures of the past where they show you sort of like big magnificent buildings that humanity used to build, and now and then they compare them with cities of today, which are mostly glass and concrete. And
Hmm.
then they sort of like, what happened, why have we lost this like great architectural sort of like technique. um, and they also show images of like excavations that allegedly show buildings to be larger than they actually are. So if and like London has a lot of these actually. If you go to London, a lot of buildings will have sort of like, there will be street level, but then you have to sort of like walk down a little bit to get to the front door, and like some windows will almost appear to be buried, and um, uh, just ground level appears to be higher up than it originally was. And to them, that is evidence of that like a mud flood has passed through and has raised ground level. And as part of this like big global conspiracy to erase Tartaria from human history, they they have used the mud flood to just like erase like basically the lower floors of most fancy buildings. They will show pictures of like excavations that appear to show underground buildings and underground structures, but that actually only show like foundations, and that kind of look like they have doors and windows. Um,
Which
but
does like
yeah,
my my dad did archaeology as like a sort of a hobby that I think he then occasionally did the occasion. I feel like I I feel like he would have described himself as a professional, but probably like made like 100 quid. But he'd do like go on archaeology digs and stuff is under the ground. Like, I don't know, like I guess like there is sort of I can see a logic there.
yeah.
How? Why is that? That feels bad. I feel like I should know that. Sorry, Dad. Like what? Presumably it's the mud flood, right? Like,
Well, yeah, that's like believers of the conspiracy theory believe that that's the reason. Like a large part of like cities, because like even when you build and like dig in modern day cities, like if you dig underground, you will find old buildings like in modern day cities.
mm,
um, and because like when people think about like archaeological digs, a lot of them will assume that they have to be thousands of years old. But if you dig in like Moscow, or if you dig in Berlin, for example, you'll find buildings from like the 1800s underneath the ground. And then that will raise a question in the minds of many of the believers of the theory, to sort of like, well, why is that? Like,
mm,
why in such a recent memory, why have we hidden these like lower structures? um, and oftentimes there's a very reasonable explanation for why that happened. For example, like St. Louis in the US, for example, um, just chose to raise ground level by 2 floors, as a flooding prevention measure, which is
mm.
like, that makes sense. And they have underground tours now. But if you ask, but a lot of people from the Tartaria theory, they don't, that doesn't compute to them, because when they think flood prevention, they think flood banks. They don't think about like more old timey solutions.
Yeah, yeah, and that's boring. Like flood prevention is boring, and burying all the old. How did
Yeah,
they literally just build houses on top of the houses?
in many cases, yeah, and especially like in older, and like this is also a thing that just happens. It still happens today in less extent than it happened previously in history. But like a lot of cities stand for a pretty significant amount of time, and there will be like sediment buildup over time. There will be
Mm,
dirt and garbage and stuff that just slowly builds up. And many times it's just easier to sort of like abandon a level and build a road on top of like one story up, and build new doors, and then just fill the lower floors with cement and have that be the new foundation, for example. Happens less often today because we take a lot more better care of like our infrastructure and our roads, and we keep everything clean, and we do sort of like ground measurement techniques. But for most of human history, we haven't had that. So people in the past just decided to be like, well, fuck it, we'll just keep building up. And this is on a time scale of like hundreds of years. So this isn't sort of like I'm going to abandon this street because in my lifetime it's been built up too much. It's just like it's a very very slow and gradual process.
Just come back from the shops and you just like only got half your door to get into the house.
Yeah.
Like,
but like these are sort of like real historical explanations that don't penetrate this conspiracy theory because those answers don't answer the questions that they have, which is mostly like they look at old pictures of cities and are confused over what they see, because like that another big part of like their evidence is actually a significant part of it is they look at like photographs of cathedrals and they will see pictures of people riding horse and buggies on the ground, and so they have this contrast of extreme like fine architectural detail in a cathedral, for example, and then they will see a very sort of low tech solution that they see as part of the horse and buggy. And to them, they don't believe that people who ride horse and buggies can have the technology or knowledge to build something that advanced.
Because they didn't have like AutoCAD or whatever they use these days to like like they would have needed Google SketchUp to be able to make the thing, and if they didn't have cars, they couldn't have had that.
Yeah, and like they because they imagine people building these buildings on a sort of like modern time scale, which is obviously nonsense, because like a cathedral could take like 200 years to build and thousands of people working continuously, and you can do a lot of shit with that.
Like the thing, like what's the one in Barcelona that's not done? What's
Yeah,
that?
I don't remember the name, but I know the one. Yeah,
Georgia. What's the? I feel like we cut it in and we can sound really clever.
Right, so we've got unfinished monument in Barcelona.
No, the cathedral. It's like really, it's really famous. I'm not a cathedrals guy, unfortunately. This is
Santiago,
and it's currently the Sagrada Familia.
Yeah, I forgot it was also going to be. It was going to be like a brilliantly Spanish name that you were also going to have tonight.
We've got Sagrada Familia.
Indeed.
Is the largest unfinished Roman Catholic church in the world. This iconic building in Barcelona.
Yes, that sounds like the one.
That's what you want.
That's okay. If I was going to write a Wikipedia page for it, that would be the first two sentences.
So we're going to smash cut to you sounding smart.
You're going, oh, the Sagrada Familia. No, we won't do that. We can keep that. I wish I had that in like real life. Could just be like, I'm trying to remember the thing to sound clever. But yeah, there's a similar thing. It is interesting now. Like, I hadn't thought about this before we talk about it now, but there does seem to be. I think there's always been like a thing about architecture. People get a bit weird about architecture of like it's all like it used to be good and now it's all rubbish. But I do, and like this is like maybe a different algorithm thing of since Elon Musk took over Twitter and that now has a For You in a similar way to TikTok has a For You. I get a lot of like classical philosophy sort of guys who they're all anonymous accounts, but they have to be guys. I'm just assuming. But like where it will be like a picture of an old building, and like Roman concrete is like a whole thing.
Oh yeah,
like obsessed with the concrete was good, and now the concrete is bad, which isn't sort of
and like this is a similar this is a sort of like the normal version of the Tartaria myth, right? Because like the Tartaria people, they sort of like they see an old building and a new building, and they're sort of like there must have been an ancient empire that built all of these things that can extract free energy from the ether and have advanced technology and was led by giants, which is obviously like lunacy, but it starts in the same sort of in that same venue. Of why can't we build fun buildings today in that same way? And it's because no one has is because no one has a history degree and no one thinks about like sort of like economics, because that's the reason it's cheaper to build buildings like that than it is to build buildings like they did in the past. And it's because of very, very simple equation. It's because labor used to be cheap and now it's not. That's it.
And like in a lot of sort of spectacular ancient buildings, labor was suspiciously free, I'm assuming.
Not actually. Like this is actually this is sometimes very much suspiciously free in terms of like, you know, obviously slavery and stuff, which has happened.
That was the most lightest condemnation of slavery I think anyone's done. It's me being like, it sounds like I'm very to just draw a line under it. I think slavery was bad.
Yeah, bad policy. I'm a politician now. I fenced it on every issue. But even sort of like even like a lot of old structures that people think were built by slaves were not always built by slaves. Like they were built by paid and skilled craftsmen. It's just that the way that they got paid is so extraordinarily cheaper back then than it is today. Because today, if you have a construction company, you need you know, advanced equipment that costs a lot of money. They need to be educated. They need to be able to read. They need to be able to be safe. They need to have good food. They need to be paid. They need housing. They need cars. And taxes have to be paid on that as well. But like if you are a pharaoh, you can just gather up like 1,000 people and pay them in beer. And that's it. Like shitty beer, which is basically just water and a little bit of hops in those days. And that's it. That's all you have to give them. And then you can have 1,000 people who have taught each other how to work stone so that they can get this beer so that they can be sustained. Like to get like a bare sustenance type pay. And so you can work them like 20 hours a day, every day for like 4 decades. And by doing that, you can achieve like a lot of stuff when it comes to construction. Even just like in the 1920s, and like in the 1800s, it was a lot cheaper to hire a bunch of laborers to refine a finite amount of material, because material was expensive. That was the thing that cost a lot of money in those days. You needed to ship in like marble, you needed to ship in sand or whatever from like far away, and that shit costs a lot of money. But today that equation is reversed, and that only shifted in like the 50s almost, where material today is extraordinarily cheap, but labor is expensive because you need like very advanced technique, which means now it's just more profitable to build buildings that are, you can just build a building quickly. If the quicker you can build a building, the better. And it just turns out that flat glass concrete cubes are very quick and easy to build compared to other shit.
And you have to pay for like hard hats and stuff, which presumably Pharaoh, like while everyone was like absolutely hammered building the pyramids, probably didn't have to to do that. It's all the red tape. That's it. It's health and safety gone mad.
It's health and safety. Yeah.
It's why you can't simply build a pyramid anymore. It was really interesting that like watching, because like all of that, like that kind of like we used to have good things, now we have bad things, often feels like a kind of like has like slightly older person vibes to it.
Yeah.
But then like in the video you made about Tartaria, like there's quite a lot of like young people into it, which like I find on TikTok seems to be like, it's like a very young people platform, I guess, in the first place. But this seemed like a weird thing to be like, although maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm thinking back to like.
No, I would agree with that though. I think that's like, I think there are a lot of young people involved in Tartaria, and I think it's but only in a very specific subculture of people who are proudly uneducated and who are in the mindset of wanting to do their own research and are very steadfast in what that research brings. So there's like this CIA document that talks about like how the Soviet Union would would like change the history of some Tartarian peoples. And again, Tartaria is like a way for Europeans to just describe everyone in Asia, basically. You could like Oriental is basically like an equivalent word. Um, but because the word Tartaria is mentioned and also faking history, that is seen as like this conclusive evidence that this empire existed, which is like a big stretch. Um, but that alone is like this sort of like conclusive evidence. Them looking at like old world fairs and seeing like very like pretty buildings and wondering why we can't have that today. To them, they can piece together the pieces themselves and are very convinced of that.
Mm.
And it's all, and that also comes with like this like deep distrust of traditional academia, because the second I come in and say something along the lines of like, here are the many reasons why you are wrong, they will start talking about like, well, you are part of the conspiracy theory.
Part of the system. I remember. So my PhD was in theatre, and there's a guy who's convinced that Shakespeare didn't write his plays, which is one that comes up is like a sort of similar thing that comes up time and time again, even though like it's pretty much established that he like he probably did. Like there's no real body of evidence to suggest he didn't.
Yeah.
But there's like a guy who will just email like the email addresses of like academics that he picks from websites, and we'll just email and has been doing it for like years and years, and we'll just email, like, find a new email address that comes up, email and be like, here's my proof that Shakespeare didn't write his plays. And then like a month later, when obviously you don't respond to this like slightly unhinged guy,
Yeah.
is like, nah, you're part of the system now, like, and it's like but like it's interesting that this is, I don't know, but maybe it's not. Maybe it shouldn't surprise me that there's younger people, A, because of the platform, and B, like, I guess like when I was growing up, it was just after 9/11 and like all of those conspiracy theories at school. That was like a fun like thing to talk about. So I sort of maybe can see. I don't know why. Just it seems to have like, I think it's got like a boomer energy to it. I think that's the thing. Is it's got like the like things
Yeah.
used to be good. Why isn't my corner shop like a pyramid, like a sort of like massive monument to the wonders of the
Yeah.
modern day?
I think I think the platform, like, maybe it's not to blame, but like is exacerbating the problem a little bit, because TikTok is not a platform for intellectual debate. Like that like it's structurally not built for it, because if you want to do intellectual debate, you kind of need the time to do it. For good and for bad, right? But like TikTok is a very time limited platform with a lot of like, and a good way to sort of like get eyeballs is to have a lot of sensational facts. Um, and those two things go very much like against like rational reasoned discourse, which takes a lot of time and preparation and like calm energies in order to sort of like suss out the facts.
Yeah, actually,
And
in my like first week on it, actually, it was the week of um the Just Stop Oil activists throwing paint on the Van Gogh. It was the sunflowers, I think, wasn't it?
yeah,
And like it was absolutely alive with like people being like, they'd found like one of the someone that had donated to Just Stop Oil was like the daughter, oh, who was it, like Eileen Getty, who's like the daughter of like an oil, who's like essentially like incredibly rich oil inheritor, who's like, I feel bad about this, I'm gonna try and like get some good PR by donating to activists, which I suppose there's a whole debate around whether maybe that's a very good thing, I don't know, but like and like they were like sort of people using this as like the evidence that this was like a kind of front that was meant to make activists look bad, and it was interesting because it was like, to a lot of like American teenagers on TikTok, there was this evidence they could draw upon.
yeah,
If you live in the UK, Just Stop Oil sort of a thing you're aware of, and you've like, I've met people that are members of it or have had some info, like, and so it's suddenly you're like, okay, no, this is obviously like a real thing, but like the distance meant that, and like there was something about TikTok that made it that it sort of drew people into this whole this sort of world of it, because I did I've not really, I've sort of gone off making TikToks. I sort of made them for a while, and then just it's a lot of effort to do them at the regularity that it feels like you sort of need to but like I did one where I was like, oh, maybe not actually, everyone. I think we're getting a bit carried away here. But people just like really convinced themselves. All the comments were like, actually, no, you don't. We've like worked this out. Because it does feel like because I go back and forth on whether the algorithm on TikTok is like good. Like people describe it as being really sort of powerful, but I often feel that when it does drag me into a particular thing it's decided I'm interested in, it does it absolutely to the extreme.
Yeah.
Sometimes in a way where if it's got it wrong, it just takes me ages, and then I'll end up like not going on TikTok for a week or something because it's decided that I only want to watch Taylor Swift or Dink or Tartaria content.
But like I think that sort of like, I think the algorithm is really good for like a lot of, for it's good enough for a lot of people, but the idea that it goes to the extreme, I think, is one of the big reasons for why Tartaria thrives on TikTok very well. Because you can start out having this sort of like why old building no more vibe, and sort of like liking traditionalism, and you can show off some of these like images that they show off of like excavations and world fairs, and being like, there are weird questions going on here, and their evidence fits very well within the TikTok format. You can have this sort of like weird intellectual debate on TikTok to support Tartaria, but debunking Tartaria on TikTok is nigh impossible, because the time it would take you to explain one of the pictures that they use as evidence is longer than already like one TikTok. And because it's really good at like pulling you into a rabbit hole, you're not going to be exposed to other people who sort of like actually answer the questions that you may have. So like a TikTok video might like show you a picture of like a specific type of building in like I can't even come up with a good example right now, but like a specific building in New York, for example, that got torn down in the early 1920s. And have a very
one that everyone's always sad about. Is that where Madison Square Garden used to be?
Oh, I have no idea.
I feel like that's one of those where like
yes it is. Penn Station is
that's like a weird one where
Madison Square Garden is where Penn Station used to be.
Oh yeah,
and people are sad. Like that's one of these things where I always get served this Twitter discourse about something that's like thousands of miles away from me, I think, and I don't really have any interest in. But for some reason, I know that there is a debate about whether they should like tear down Madison Square Garden and rebuild a train station that hasn't been there for 100 years.
But like but that's sort of like where it goes, right? Like and because like there are very easy explanations for why they tore it down. Like you might disagree with the reasons, right? But they're not supernatural. Like you can sort of be like, yeah, okay, we wanted to build Madison Square Garden, we wanted to make more money, and fuck aesthetics and fuck public transportation. We want to make more money and drive cars. Like that is a good explanation for why the world looks the way it does today. It's not a happy answer, but for a lot of people who are involved in Tartaria, that sort of like that doesn't make sense. Like it doesn't make sense for them why people would make bad choices for how the world looks and operates, because to them that doesn't compute. Like they don't realize that other people would have a benefit from it.
What's the phrase about like assuming malice instead of stupidity or whatever it is? Like never assume malice, where stupidity would like I've butchered it. But it's that similar thing, isn't it? Like why
Yeah.
would you assume that someone just like made a bad call instead of like had like a scheming plan where they decided to flood the earth with mud or something? Presumably quite a large. Sorry, I mean where I'm jumping right back. Presumably quite a large mud flood that covered everything everywhere.
Yeah, this is the thing that's super weird, right? Because like they within the theory, like the like domes are Tartarian architecture, and domes exist in like Washington D.C. They exist in like California, in Japan, in China, Europe, Africa. Um, they never really dig into sort of the specifics of sort of like to support how things happened, but that's the only conclusion I can draw on, that basically the entire world was covered in like about this much of mud, and that was like unevenly distributed around the entire world.
There was like a really big hill somewhere of mud that just like got dispersed like
Yeah.
over the entire earth.
But the idea, like they fully believe that we live in a post-apocalyptic world. Like they fully believe that like this mud flood was an apocalyptic disaster, that really like wiped out most of human population. Because when they look at these like old historical pictures, they will also always point out that the streets are deserted, that there are almost no one in the streets. And to them, that means that when they took those pictures, those are like British explorers rediscovering like old Tartarian ruins, um, where people don't live anymore. And this is what's called basically like the Great Reset. They believe that like when Tartaria fell, that was one of the great resets of the world. And now we have this new world order, and humanity has had to sort of like rebuild itself and has lost much along the way.
I feel like I can occasionally be a bit of a pessimist, but I don't think I'd go as far as like post apocalyptic to describe like I think I very much sort of believe a better world is possible, but I'm not sure I would on a day-to-day basis describe everything like I don't know, post apocalyptic very much conjures up like The Last of Us for me.
But imagine
Maybe
sort
that's
of yeah.
some of that is my experience. I'm sure, and I'm sure lots of people's lives are much worse than mine.
But imagine sort of like imagine The Last of Us 200 years after the show. Humanity has rebuilt, and new technologies have emerged, but we don't have the internet anymore, for example. And then for some reason the empires of that world are erasing the history of the time before the apocalypse and saying that the way it is now is the way it is always built.
And then they were accidentally foiled by some TikTokers. It was interesting what like sorry I went back to the mud flood thing, but like it was interesting what you were saying about it, like pulling people to extremes, because like that's what you were saying about like being into history and strategy games. It gradually pulled you to white supremacist content because it felt that there was a natural flow there.
Yeah, it's a natural endpoint.
And I guess people that are engaging with that kind of stuff are the people that are going to end up being the whatever the equivalent like a whale is on TikTok, of like the people that are going to watch the huge amounts of stuff.
Yeah. And and to be fair, like the vast majority of people who sort of like have questions about old architecture or like believe that history was fake, most of them never reach sort of the extremes of believing that giants used to control the world using magic energy. But that's also one of the reasons why there's no like canon here, right? Because there's just like huge spectrum of like people who have like sometimes quite reasonable questions about architecture, and then you have people who are absolutely like buck wild, off the chain. And I prefer to study the people who are off the chain weird, but I think most people sort of fall on the spectrum. But TikTok has an incentive to really push you against that extreme, and I think young people are like, this discourse doesn't exist much anywhere else. So I think that like when young people encounter this discourse, that's sort of the only way that trail goes.
yeah, there's not going to be it's like, it is interesting, like some of the communities and stuff that do exist on TikTok that don't exist elsewhere
Mm.
because of the ways in which the sort of platform does shape the kinds of content that are pushed on it. I think it's really interesting the way that I think on any platform there's often the advice to like pick a like very specific thing to talk about is often like choosing like YouTube advice always tells you to like choose a niche, but I quite enjoy making quite a I suppose like there is sort of a some sort of glue that holds some of it together, but I would say I cover like and like you do similarly cover like a reasonable range of stuff, and I sometimes watch TikTokers who like I think ages ago I discovered I came across a video by a comedian who was doing like a quick sort of bit about being a teacher in like a British secondary school at lunchtime. I can't think what the joke was at all, but being like, "Oh, stop kicking the ball" or whatever. It was funny. It was funny, but it wasn't
Classic British humor.
classic.
Stop kicking the ball.
Stop. It was like my new catchphrase. Stop kicking. But like, and I was like, oh, that's funny, and I must have liked it or whatever. And then it came back to like some more of her stuff kept popping up, and like it was all really specifically focused about comedy about teachers in British secondary schools, because like to just be doing comedy where it's lots of different things would be too much of a shotgun approach. That TikTok needs you to have like a really specific niche that you don't like go outside of at all, which I
Yeah.
think sometimes works. There's a guy occasionally watch who is good at archery, and he like watches videos, he watches like films people doing archery and tries to do it, and that's kind of fun. But it was like it was like with something like comedy where you sort of expect someone to hop between loads of stuff. It was almost like I try not to do like a cultural decline kind of anxieties thing, but like it did feel like this person is being forced to just do this one specific thing again and again and again forever, and never
Yeah.
really
There's a few sort of compilation videos on Twitter where they will go to a person's profile and just scroll through their profile and show a person having the exact same sentence in the exact same like over enthusiastic fake tone, but talking about completely different things all at the same time, but because they found a niche, because that, like as you say, like that's how you succeed on TikTok. You have a niche and you have to go hard on
really
that
stick
specific
on it.
one niche. But then you end up with people who become super unoriginal to the point where being more this being the more of the exact same niche becomes the content. So and this is one of the reasons why I don't think TikTok is going to like take over sort of like the digital market space in the same way that like I've heard a lot of other creators be like concerned that like TikTok is going to be like the new thing. I don't think it's going to be though, because every other medium that has survived does so because of variety. And TikTok does the opposite. TikTok rewards stagnation, which works in the short term for individual creators, but I don't think that that's a long-term solution, because the second a creator on TikTok changes their narrative, they lose all traction. Which also, like for conspiracy theories on TikTok, it incentivizes people to become more extreme. It incentivizes people like it incentivizes people to become more like outraging and become more extravagant. Like Andrew Tate, for example, became super popular on TikTok, or his videos became super popular on TikTok. It became a huge sort of gateway for a lot of young boys. And a big reason for why it's like that is because a large part of the content about Andrew Tate starts out in an extraordinarily similar way, which is this like hyper masculinity in a very sort of misogynistic way, that becomes outrageous. But if Andrew Tate ever, for some reason, obviously he wouldn't, but like if he for some reason like had a change of heart, like and wanted to become like a feminist spokesperson, he would have a much more easier time of doing that on basically any other platform than TikTok, because the second he would do that on TikTok, the career would be over. It would be damaged on YouTube, but I think people have done rebrands on YouTube. I don't think you can do that on TikTok.
If he just got really into like canning stuff, like people would do that, don't you? That's like a
Yeah.
big, like just putting stuff in cans to keep it. Although maybe there's probably a bit of crossover between like him and like preppers, maybe.
Maybe.
But no,
Andrew can.
because if you've got to just basically say the same thing, you have to do the like say the same thing, but this time it's worse, I guess. Like
Yeah.
and stick on that.
And I think that's one of the reasons why Andrew Tate's content became more misogynistic over time, because that became part of his brand. Tartaria can't just be content with talking about like, oh, our old architecture is good. They have to become old architecture is good because an ancient civilization did it, and then that becomes old news. So you have to sort of like ramp it up even more spectacularly, and it just becomes this sort of like,
and you have to add.
It becomes sort of like this like outrage, not outrage, like grandiose creep. You have it has to creep larger and larger and larger until it just becomes unsustainable.
I think even making normal content, I think I would struggle to just do the same thing again and again. Like I do, I like being able to do a variety of stuff, I think. And it's particularly interesting given that TikTok does not pay particularly well at all. So so you're sort of doing, I don't know. So people who are really mining that thing are probably not getting a huge amount of reward for it.
No.
But all of which is to say that YouTube is the best platform because it's the one that we're on, right?
Yeah, that's the good one.
And that probably does bring us to the end of our chat. So if people want to use youtube.com more than they use TikTok and would like to find you, where could they find you, Mia?
First of all, I want to apologize for ranting and raving about this fucking theory, because my life got dedicated to this theory for like a month, and the second I released the video on it, I've sort of excised it from my own mind.
Went outside and were like,
sunlight free. But yeah, if you want to see like my content, you can go to miamulder.com and that'll take you straight to my YouTube video.
Links to everything else.
Links.
I do find I spend like a month or two making a video, and I get to about 2 weeks before it goes out, and I go, does anyone else care about this thing, or have I just spent? And I lose all concept of what people know already and what they don't, because I now have spent so long in this thing that I'm like, am I assuming knowledge, or am I treating people like idiot? Like, it is the trials of the long form YouTube creator.
The final week before like we release videos is the one where you feel like you lose all concept of reality. Like you can make a really smart, like intelligent sounding video, but at the very end it just falls apart.
I've never noticed that watching any of your videos. They're all very coherent. I aspire to that coherence. But thank you so much for chatting with me.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me. I hope I made sense.
You did. We'll cut it at some point. I think we were recording one the other day, and I was like, we need to not worry too much about doing about me doing and thank you very much, because I just kept doing it again and again, and I'd be like, thank you, and that's the end, and thank you again. And I was like, we just got. Thanks for listening to the show. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Mia. As I mentioned partway through, if you want to check out further episodes of Induction, then there's no better way to do so than through my streaming service, Nebula. So if you want to get exclusive, early access to every single episode of the show a full 2 weeks before they reach anyone else, then you can do so by heading to nebula.tv/induction. Thanks for listening once again, and I'll see you in the next episode of Induction.